Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be more S13 progress, let's call it. What are we going to be doing in this video? It's going to be power steering. So these cars, if you're familiar with S chassis, they're getting old, they're getting up there in age. This one here is 93. It's 32 years in age, and rubber hoses, power steering hoses, the factory stuff, it gets brittle after years of heat cycle, years of use, and let's face it, they usually start sweating or leaking, and that's just creates a mess and not something that you ever want to deal with. So what do most people do? They usually, people will upgrade at least the high pressure line. There's a lot of companies that make just the high pressure line, and that's fine and everything, but it still leaves the return line and the low pressure line to the rack old and brittle, and it doesn't really solve your problem. So what are the other options? People buy full power steering kits, which is good too. Then you get all new lines, they're all AN, you get a reservoir, but those kits can be pretty pricey. So what I've always done is I try to make my own lines whenever I can. High pressure lines, you generally can find a hydraulic shop or something local to you, and they can make a line that will be able to withstand more than the pressure that a little car power steering is going to face. So that's usually what I do, and in this video, that's exactly what we're going to do. All right, so let's go over some of the stuff that we have here. Basically, we have -6 and -10 AN hose, but this is actually, they're both PTFE AN hose. So inside has a liner. It can withstand more pressure than your traditional AN hose, and it doesn't break down with, I mean, for power steering, I don't think it really matters. You can use the regular stuff. But for fuel, PTFE is very commonly used because it won't break down with E85 fuels or stuff like that. So moving on, we also have a S13 factory power steering reservoir. That's looking kind of rough. We're going to refresh that. And I have a pump here. This is a KA pump. This is just for visual showing on the table here where stuff goes. My SR pump here is on the motor. I've already rebuilt it, resealed it. Didn't want to take it off, so I'm using the KA one. The KA one is pretty much the same. I think it's just the pulley that's different. So let's go into some of the fittings that we have here. These fittings are from Chase Bays. And basically what we have here is a fitting from Chase Bays. This is a M14 by 1.5. It is specific to power steering. It's got an O-ring here, and it's longer. And what it does is it converts this end to -6. This is for high pressure, and it goes in the steering rack. This one is the other fitting that goes into the steering rack. This is a M16 by 1.5 that converts to -6. And then we have a banjo to -6 conversion fitting. And this is actually the Chase Bay's version of the banjo bolt. This is specific to S chassis, KA SR. And we also have this fitting here, which is what we're going to use to adapt the pump. So it replaces this one here. And it converts it to a -10. And then obviously for the reservoir, we're going to have to cut off the inlet and outlet and weld on a -6 and a -10 bung. And then this one is a ISR high pressure power steering line. I've never used this before, or I think I have on a friend's car. And to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan because the ends don't swivel. So this is a fixed position line. So hopefully this is not going to cause an issue later on when I go to install it. But basically, the high pressure line, it goes into the banjo here, the factory one. ISR gives you an adapter that threads into there and it converts it to -6. But instead of using this, because I actually don't have one of these for my SR, I'm basically going to be using the Chase Bay's banjo, which goes in there, with their banjo to -6. So this is going to slide on here, and then it's going to go into the pump. So that's basically it in terms of what we're using. One thing to note is this is not just a regular banjo bolt. It actually has a restrictor built into it, which is the same as OEM. OEM also has a restrictor built into it. If you don't have this, your power steering's not going to work properly. So we've gone over all of this, and the only thing left is the hose ends for the hose. I have an assortment of 90-degree and straight -6 fittings. I'll go over what we're actually going to use, but that'll be once we start looking at things in the engine bay. We are going to modify the factory power steering reservoir with these -6 and -10 bungs, and that'll allow us to adapt the AN hoses to the reservoir. So let's jump right into that. right, reservoir is mounted, and now we can figure out what lengths we need for our AN lines, and we can start cutting and assembling lines. Okay, so here we have the SR20 pump and the factory banjo, or the factory banjo bolt. I am switching this out because when I bought this S13, the previous owner had already deleted power steering, so there was no banjo side with the hose that goes on here. So I'm gonna take this off. I'm gonna keep this because this is actually from one of my other SRs, so I'll put it aside and end up using it later. But here we have the Chase Bays banjo bolt with the restrictor in it, and the Chase Bays adapter that will go from banjo to -6, so we can install that. Okay, so we've got that on. I'm gonna leave it just hand tight because I don't know yet which orientation I want this to face. So we can leave that loose or hand tight for now, and then we'll move on to this one over here. We're gonna convert that to a -10 with this fitting. So there is an O-ring. We're gonna install that first, and it's got a little bit of lube on it, just to make sure it doesn't get pinched, and it'll actually hold it. Okay, and there we go, installed. So now we can accept -6 and -10 on the pump. Okay, so just to go over, the power steering rack I have in this has been rebuilt, so it's almost a brand new rack. I already had these lines installed. I already installed these lines previously. These are ISR crossover lines. The only thing we have to do now is we're going to install those Chase Bays fittings in the rack. This one is actually an ISR one that came with that high pressure line, but I'm not going to use that. I just had it in here to cap it off. I put a -6 cap on it. So we're going to take this out and we're going to install those two Chase Bays fittings. So we got the ISR fitting out and the plug out, so now we can install the Chase Bays fittings. This one is the M14 by 1.5 to -6 adapter fitting. I'm installing it on the, you can't get the mix up because it's M14 and it's M16, but this is the high pressure. So we'll thread that in. It bottoms out before the nut actually, or the flange nut area can actually reach the rack. That's why I decided to switch to these. It just has more engagement. And then this one is the M16 by 1.5. But actually, before I put that in, I'm going to tighten that one first. Alright, so we've got both fittings installed in the rack. That's going to allow us to attach -6 AN line to both the high pressure and the low pressure side, or high pressure and low pressure side. So yeah, let's move on. Okay, first thing, we will start with the -10. So I got two fittings here. One is a 90-degree fitting, and one is a 45. And then I have some rope here, which kind of just gives me a better idea of how long of a length of line we need to cut. So the first thing we're going to do is put these fittings on the reservoir and the pump, and then we can get an idea with the rope how long we're going to need. So here we have the -10 fitting on the pump, and then obviously on the reservoir, I welded a -10 bung onto that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 90 on the reservoir, and then this 45 on the pump. And then I'll just kind of angle it, I guess, in the direction that I think it would be pointed at. And then we'll take this 90 and we'll thread it onto the bottom. So that'll kind of point towards where the pump should be. Obviously, this would be better if the engine was in the car, but we're not quite there yet. So I should get a rough idea with how an SR generally sits in the engine bay. Like if you look at the cross member and the oil pan here. Yeah, you can kind of see that from the cross member, you got to be at least 8 inches. 8 inches forward should be where the pump will be sitting. So kind of like, if I went like this, you can see that it would be sitting somewhere just shy of the front sway bar. So I'm going to get that rope and try to get an idea of how long of a line we need. Okay, so we have the fittings on, and I actually ended up measuring from the stud of the engine mount to the front of the power steering pump, and it's roughly 9 inches. So I put this measuring tape here just so we can visually see. This is about where the pump would be, and where that other -10 fitting is going to be. So obviously it's not going to be down here. It would be, you know, somewhere here in the engine bay. So this line's going to be pretty short. Honestly, I think something like this length is probably already good enough. But I guess it's always better to give yourself more, and then if you need to, you can cut it shorter. And then obviously you're not going to want the line tensioned tight like that. So we'll give ourselves something kind of like this. And yeah, so basically we're looking about 13 inches. So I can cut a section of line that's 13 inches. So this is our -10 PTFE line. Okay, so 13 inches is roughly here. You can give that a little mark. There's a couple different methods that people can use. I've tried the angle grinder / chop saw to cut it with just like a abrasive cutoff wheel. That works. But over the years of doing more and more AN lines, I ended up just getting the right tool. This one is from Vibrant. Yeah, this just cuts it very easily. There's very little like fray. You get a nice, clean, straight cut, which I feel like when you're doing AN lines, that's pretty important that it's straight. Otherwise, the fitting kind of doesn't want to sit properly. So let's get this cut. Okay, we'll put the excess aside. So that's it. That's our section of 13-inch. Yeah. And now we can start putting the fittings on. So PTFE line is a little bit different from your regular AN line. So this one, I will show you. This is another fitting. This is a regular, regular AN hose fitting. And then this is a regular AN hose. So you can see the difference between the two of them. The PTFE has like a liner inside of it, or the actual hose is a Teflon hose. And then the regular is just a rubber hose. They both have braiding on the outside. I've assembled a lot of the regular AN hoses, and it's super simple, really easy. But one thing you can see from the two of them is the regular AN -10 is actually a bigger overall diameter compared to the PTFE -10, which is interesting. But yeah, I've used a lot of the regular ones. I did the power steering on the RX-7 with regular AN, and it's been fine, but I wanted to try PTFE to see if it just holds up longer, or see if it's just better in general. Another thing that's actually interesting or different between the PTFE and the regular AN is this fitting. This fitting just has two pieces. This slips into the hose, this slips over it, and then you tighten it down. Whereas the PTFE fitting, it's about the same, but the difference here is that inside of it, it has this sort of collet, and this actually slips in between the braiding and over the Teflon hose, if you can see, if the camera's focusing. But yeah, so let's start assembling the fitting onto the line. So what you're supposed to do is, after you've cut it, you can see this one is kind of bent out of shape. So I'm going to stick this in and just kind of flare the hose, the Teflon section, back out. Try to bring it around again. This side is fine because it was cut from the supplier. So what we're going to do is we're going to slip this over the outside. Try to get the frayed edges over. And then we're going to use this tool to peel back, the braiding from the PTFE inside. Okay, so kind of separated it. We've kind of got this slipped on, but we got to go more. So I'm going to use this mallet to kind of tap it in more. Yeah, so if you can see that, I think it looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm just going to use some WD-40 to lubricate the threads and this section of the fitting so it can slide in a little bit easier. And we'll start pressing this in. There we go. So it's fully seated up against that collet. And now we can take the sleeve here, or the other piece of the fitting. Okay, so I got it about this much. I'm going to put it in the vise and get it the rest of the way. So what I have in the vise here is some aluminum AN jaws, and they just sit in the vise and just allow it to hold the fitting without damaging it. So you just want to go snug, not too tight, because you don't want to distort this fitting. So we've got it in here, and now we can just start tightening this down. Okay, just another tool that I have here. It's adjustable AN wrench. So this whole thing is aluminum. So aluminum on aluminum won't mar the fitting too badly. It still can if you're not careful. And I'm just holding the I'm holding the hose at the bottom to feel if, as I tighten it, is it pushing the hose out, because you don't want it to push it out, obviously, as you tighten this down. So I'm getting pretty close to bottoming out the top to the bottom. So I'm going to go slowly, and I'm going to watch to see how much closer we get. Now, it's leaving a few marks on it because I've damaged this tool over the years. If you can see inside. So that's not helping, but I think it's fine. Nothing too crazy. A few marks, but it's not, you're not going to see it. So it's not fully bottomed out, the fittings. You can kind of see a little gap in between. I could probably get it one more turn, so let me see if that helps. Sorry, what I meant was, what I meant by one turn is I just turned it one section over. So it's a little bit closer of a gap now, which I think is good. So we got this one fitting on, and now you can get an idea. Once I put it on here, you can kind of see it looks pretty long, but this we could always cut it down. But realistically, I think the hose will be able to bend kind of downwards. I'll show you once I put it on here. But so the other end is going to go into this fitting here. You can see it. It's 45 that we have on the pump, and that completes one of the lines. So I'm going to put this on the reservoir and then we'll take a look. Okay, so this is what I meant. It's attached to the reservoir, and obviously you can see the line, depending on how you route it, it can be a little bit shorter. So I think this length is pretty good. We can put the other fitting, the 45 degree -10, on the other side, and we'll be done with this one. So let's do that. So the line is done. We can attach it to the reservoir. As you can see, I think it's a good amount. We can actually run it back like this, or we could run it forward as well. The nice thing is, obviously these fittings are swivel, so we could end up putting it kind of like this. It could be like this, or like this. Probably realistically something like this. It could even come back if it's too long. This line is done, so we can move on to the other lines. Actually, what I'll do is let's install the high pressure ISR line. Okay, so we've got the ISR high pressure line. I'm going to zoom into the fittings on the rack, and hopefully you can kind of see. Okay, so this probably looks a little crazy right now because we just have lines kind of flying all over the place. But this is the high pressure line that we just installed. So if you can see, it goes down there to the power steering rack, and it goes into the smaller fitting, which is the M14 by 1.5 to -6 chase bays adapter fitting. That is the high pressure side. So you can see that the line comes up, and it should be able to sit kind of right here where the power steering pump will be. That's going to go into this fitting right here. The camera will focus. There we go. So it'll go into this fitting right here, and then we have one more line to do, and that is the low pressure on the steering rack here. That's the M16 by 1.5 to -6 fitting, and it's gonna go to this -6 on the reservoir. So let's get the fittings that we need. It should be probably two 90-degree -6 fittings. Should work pretty well. But we'll get an idea once I put it on the rack and put it on the power steering reservoir. If 90s will be good, or if we need maybe like a 45 or something. Which I am trying to keep more spares on hand, just so that it's easier to assemble lines when you need to, or if you ever need spares. It's just good to have instead of having to wait. for something to come in from an order. So let's put them on the rack and the reservoir. It's going to be hard to see because the steering rack that was rebuilt was painted black and the fittings are black. But we'll put this dash 6 90-degree fitting on here. And kind of point it in the direction of where it needs to go. This AC line is just going to keep falling down, so I'm not going to bother with it. And we'll put the other 90-degree dash 6 fitting down here. Get that kind of snug. And we're going to point it up towards the reservoir. So now we can take our rope and get an idea of the routing that we want to take with the line. I do plan on running AC in this car, so this should be sitting like this at the AC compressor. So let's try to get a good idea here. Maybe something like this. Give yourself a little excess. And we'll measure this out, trim it on the dash 6 hose, and then we'll time lapse putting the hose together. Does anybody else cut zip ties this way so that you can still reuse the zip tie? Or is that a super frugal thing to do for zip ties? I don't know. Put it down in the comments if you cut your zip ties that way, so you get second use, or a second use out of them. Alright, so this dash 6 line is done. We can attach it to the steering rack. Okay, and then this can go behind the AC line and come up to, actually, you know what? We'll even go behind the brake line. And just like that, we have our power steering reservoir mounted, adapted to AN-6-10. We have our -10 feed hose that will go to the pump, finished. And then we have our -6 low pressure from the rack to the reservoir. And we have our high pressure -6 that goes from the rack to the pump. So we are another step closer to getting this SR20 into the S13. And I'm pretty happy with that. What do you guys think? You guys think that seemed pretty easy? Leave it down in the comments if you would do something like this instead of buying an entire power steering kit. because as you can see, it wasn't that hard to adapt the Reservoir to AN. I did have a little bit of trouble welding it. I guess years of power steering fluid sitting in that Reservoir kind of just got into the metal, and when I started welding it, the metal was bubbling and super porous. But I did leak test it. I filled it with water and let it sit for a bit, and the fittings didn't have any sweating or anything around from the welds, so that was good. But you can see that it wasn't that hard to adapt AN to the stock Reservoir. Still mounts in the stock location, which is a benefit. And the only thing that I bought was the ISR pre-made high pressure line. But like I said, that's something you can go to your local hydraulic fitting store and they can easily make you a high pressure line that probably swivels, has swivel fittings and crimped ends, and can handle more pressure than you would need. You easily get that done by a local hydraulic store near you, and then everything else is just conversion fittings, which are a lot more affordable than the entire power steering kit, and AN lines that you can assemble yourself. The good thing is, if I ever want to adapt a power steering cooler, I can easily do it. I can modify a line or just build a new line. You guys saw how simple it was. So let me know down in the comments whether this is something you guys would tackle yourself, or would you buy a power steering kit that's probably $500-600 bucks. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please click the like button, and if you're not subscribed, please click the subscribe button. And yeah, we're one step closer to getting the SR20 into the S13, and hopefully I'll be enjoying this car this summer. And stay tuned for the next video, because we're gonna keep banging things out on the S13. See you guys.